Hello, and welcome to another episode of ACTO's Launchpad Podcast. In this podcast, we highlight change agents that are pushing the industry forward and transforming how healthcare functions. In today's episode, we have a very special guest, someone that has been a mentor to me, a friend to me, and is also ACTO's first customer in life sciences. I've learned so much from Liv over the years, and she's helped me shape my thinking in terms of the future of medical device sales, future of commercialization in life sciences, and overall the macro trends in healthcare. I'd be remiss if we didn't invite Liv to do an episode with us, and she agreed. So here we have Liv today, bringing over 17 years of experience in medical device commercialization, sales, and marketing. Liv, welcome to the Launchpad Podcast.
Thanks, Parth. It's awesome to be here. Well, that's quite an introduction. But you say you've learned a lot from me, and I would say the same is true for me. I think you and your team at ACTO have done some pretty amazing things in the way you look at data and technology and how you can make the whole space better is amazing. So it's awesome to be here with you. And I look forward to spending the time and learning more from you today.
Awesome, Liv. That's great. And I know that ACTO's journey started with this one cold email that we sent to you. I'll admit, it was more than one cold email. We kept emailing you and calling you till you gave us a chance to give you a demo. Thank you for believing in us and how the world has changed in so many ways from our first interaction in late 2016. I think it was also Christmas time is when we first had our conversation. And in the last...
How appropriate.
I know. It was the best Christmas present we got. And Liv, I know over the last 4 years, and when we first started talking back in 2016, we were talking about some trends and things that were shifting in the life sciences industry, medical devices in particular. So much of that has accelerated, and there have been some major pivots this year. I know you have a much broader lens to all of this with all the experience that you have. Maybe that's a place where we can start, and we can hop on in this proverbial DeLorean, go back in time, and would love to hear from you, Liv. In your view, how have things changed, and what have been some of the recent accelerators and pivots?
Sure. I love the reference to the DeLorean, by the way. Sometimes I wish that we could get on that DeLorean. Yeah, man, life has certainly changed a lot. The industry has changed significantly since I first started. As you mentioned, I started over 17 years ago in a sales capacity. And I'll never forget that first sales class. It was 6 weeks of home study, and it was predominantly paper, some CD-ROMs, and you went through the material as much as you could on your own. And then you spent a month in house and then really dove in day after day, poring over the anatomy, procedures, technology to become an expert. And I think about that experience back at that point to where we are today. And almost everything is digitized, right? We went from having some really basic kind of learning management systems that, you didn't really get a good sense as to how you were progressing or what you needed. You had paper manuals for everything. You would log into a site to get your paper marketing materials. And now we have these sales enablement tools that really drive efficiency and productivity for reps, but also give management teams, marketing, clinical teams so much more knowledge and information about how their products are doing, how they're performing, and they can pivot so much more quickly. So I see that as being one of our kind of significant changes as you look at the inception of how a sales rep comes into an organization and then how they grow with time. And I've taken on different roles from training to leading various clinical and sales teams launching products in different countries. And certainly with coronavirus, the ability to travel and be face to face has really shifted. I mean, here you and I are virtually meeting together, and as much as I'd love to be in person and give you a hug and regroup, that'd be great. But we really had to figure out how to pivot to meet our customers' needs where they are today, and so I think, companies, if the faster they can employ some of this machine learning, big data, digital solutions, I think the more facile they'll be, and the more successful they'll be in the future. For example, I think Medtronic's thinking really seriously about how do they adjust their business model to be able to navigate not just a pandemic, but how do they make their teams more efficient, and how do they drive productivity? And they're looking at solutions like Explore Surgical that can remotely connect their team into procedure rooms, that takes the best practices and provides that hard clinical data back to their team to publish studies more quickly. So, I think that there's so many exciting things that we're seeing that the pandemic has really caused, that will push us to be much better than we have been in the past. Even if you look at the use of telehealth, I think there was an article that was published that showed the growth of telehealth was over 15,000% from March of last year to March of this year in terms of claims. So we've made a lot of progress.
Liv, thank you for sharing that. So powerful. And what I find fascinating is, firstly, your experience of being in the field all the way emanating outwards and into senior strategic leadership and getting that full 360 perspective. I know that in the next 15-20 minutes, we're going to peel open all those layers, and I can't wait to hear all those insights. One thing that I find fascinating, going back to the sales rep for a second, is just the interesting interrelationship of that human element and the technology. And it almost seems it's that interplay and almost like a sliding scale of how over the course we've gone from one end to the other. I remember there was a time when it was all relationship selling in life sciences, and then there was regulations and the rise of the value-based sale and expertise, as you said it, augmented by the relationship, and now technology as an enabler on both those fronts. Coming back to the expertise, one thing that I find fascinating also is when I talk to folks that are from outside the life sciences industry, the very unique role that education plays in life sciences. Would love to hear your thoughts, Liv, specifically in medical device commercialization from lab to bedside, so to speak. What role does education play in your view, and why is that important?
So I think education is probably one of the most critical roles in a sales rep entree into an organization, because it gives them an impression of the kind of the investment that the company wants to make in the rep's journey. And so the more streamlined and the better that training can be, it tells the rep that, yeah, I'm important, that what I do matters, and they want me to be the best that I can be. How can I figure out how to be my best too? But the challenge, I think, a lot of times that happens with training is it's hard to customize it to exactly what each individual needs. And everybody comes with a different level of experience. And so you can waste time for some where they may really need to focus on other nuances or aspects of what they need to learn. versus another individual. And I think, when I think back to some of the training we did at Apollo, I think that was one of the hardest things to customize was giving people the information they needed to make them the most successful. And that's where, in all of our conversations, as you mentioned, from the early days of ACTO, I really felt that ACTO had this vision of how they could streamline and give individuals bite-sized information to make them better, more efficient, and more knowledgeable. But it's a journey for sure. And I look at some of the things that we struggled with the most. And one was that bite-sized learning where you can customize it and make it really interactive so that it sinks in and people are able to then do something meaningful with that information, to sitting in a training class and needing reps to really see cases live with some of the best practices of how a device is used, or what areas of the anatomy are really important call-outs. And I think about how much our technology has shifted since I was even running training programs. And one of the, I had talked with Explorer because I love their digitized workflow where they're able to really pull out the important aspects of the procedure of the device. And now you can see those procedures live without having to travel around the country to be able to get into them. And then you've got things like virtual reality that is now coming to the market where you can start to simulate some of these events without having to have the expense of a cadaver, or you can have the look and feel of it without actually having to have all of the hard product. So I think that we are becoming more savvy, and with that, I think that it makes our reps more effective because we're giving them a truer experience. And so I think that's one of the things as I look at, from when you and I first talked, and getting reps from kind of that, block of clay into a fully molded, ready to roll sales rep. There's a lot that goes into it, and each individual needs kind of different sculpting.
Lee, well put. I love the clay analogy, especially it's malleable, and we're always continuously growing and remolding and reshaping ourselves. So let's follow in the footsteps of that sales rep, this medical devices rep, where they came in, built up that expertise so they can drive that value. I'm a big Marvel fan, so the analogy that comes to mind is like almost Iron Man, where they, or Iron Woman, where they get all the, the armor with the technology. They're enabled. You mentioned some of them, and now they're ready to take their first case. What does that look like today, and where do you see that going in the future? What is a sort of an ideal relationship of a medical devices rep with a healthcare provider?
Interesting question. So I think, let me just reiterate the question so I make sure that I'm answering it correctly. So you really want to understand from the time that a rep comes into getting all of their armor on, understanding the knowledge, they leave, kind of the then what? And how can they make a difference? And then how will that maybe evolve? So I think that's part of the challenge too, is you as a training team, you impart all of this information with the group, almost like giving them the mountain to carry. Say, you just keep piling it on and giving them more and more. And then they've got this big backpack of armor that they're carrying, and they're trying to figure out which one do they pull out of the bag at the right moment. And so I think, one of the things that there are so many different tools then that reps are also given, like I remember when you and I were first chatting, we had Salesforce and we had Showpad and we had ACTO and we had Doc Matter and all these different sources of truth and data. And so it starts to become really complicated for a rep to figure out, where do I go for which piece of source of truth to make myself most effective. And I know one of the things I really pushed ACTO to do is figure out, how can you put all of those pieces together to so that it makes it easier for reps to know exactly what they need when they need it. And you guys were even more forward thinking, and then started to deliver it back to reps based off of how they're interacting with content. So I think one of the things I've seen shift is instead of making reps have to search for what they need based off of user behavior, you're now pushing that information back to the reps and providing better analytics to organizations to say, hey, you've got a major gap here, and you might want to think about, how do you coach your rep to be better at this? Or managers can't be in cases, or they're not with their reps all the time. And one of the training courses I once went to, I think the statistic was, by having a manager ride with their rep 4 times in the first 6 months, made their reps hit their forecast within a 6-month period, which they had raised that ability. But the truth is, it's really difficult for most managers to get in the field that often. And so you guys have done some really unique things of being able to incorporate video into coaching, using AI to identify user behavior and provide information back. So I think AI and this machine learning and big data is probably the way of the future in terms of making reps better at what they do. So every time they have a customer interaction, they are 10 times more productive and successful. And frankly, that improves patient outcomes at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Liv, this is very interesting. So playing that back, taking a slice of this sales rep's journey, you have initially we're shaping them, building that expertise with micro learning, as you mentioned, enabling with them with some of the tools, and also being creative in the environment that we're in and how we educate them. For example, in addition to micro learning and stuff like that, is also incorporating more forward technologies like VR, really not letting the limitations of travel and the coronavirus era holding back. There's still paths for us to get the sales reps equipped and into that armor, so they can have meaningful dialogues with and assist the surgeons. And when we move forward, using data to further reinforce the right messages. I know this is the area where you're doing a lot of work at Explorer, and how do you support the sales reps while they're taking on the cases? If you don't mind sharing a bit more about some of the insights that you all have had, and how do you best enable the reps in their time of need from that vantage point, and also your thoughts on the future. How does that whole case support model itself evolve?
Yeah, great question. So I think we're already seeing the case support model shift, and reps have always considered themselves to be kind of the secret sauce of a case. And if you ask a physician who's worked with good reps, they would say the same thing, that the cases always go better when they have so-and-so rep in the room, and those reps probably still have access to most of their cases, but that's shifting. And I think there was Jody Eddy from Boston Scientific, one of their senior leaders recently, was part of the MedExec Women Conference. And she said, digital technology is really the enhancement to the secret sauce of what sales reps can do. And so when I think about, some of what we've learned from EdExplore is, for those reps who can get in, we can take kind of your C player or your rep who maybe has limited knowledge, give them everything that they need to know about the case and the procedure, troubleshooting, and be able to put that in front of them as the procedure is going on. So they're always prepared at every step of the procedure to be successful. And then you've got the second layer of it, which is really something that we've focused on since the start of coronavirus, is how do you remotely get support for those reps or those team members who maybe aren't as confident or competent. And so you can remotely connect a manager in, or a trainer in, a product director, R&D, whomever, to be able to see what's going on, hear what's going on, and provide feedback either to the rep or to the people in the procedure. So I think, we're starting to see not limitations by reps' knowledge, but the ability to really enhance what they're able to do to be more effective. And then, you and I have talked a lot about this, but data is such a big thing to medical device companies and to pharmaceutical companies. They use the data for different reasons to try and figure out how do they improve their overall commercial organization, product design, et cetera. And one of the things that we're able to do is collect that data live to be able to say, okay, these clinical sites aren't performing the way they need to. We need to make a shift in how we're on the support that we're giving those clinical sites, or creating benchmarking data to say, you surgeon or you physician are performing, you're in the top 10% of all people who are doing this based off of all these benchmarks, or you're in the bottom 20%. Here are some things that you could do to improve those skills. So data is such a powerful thing to make what we do better and make us so much more agile. And historically, data is, you're slow to get that because you have to wait till kind of the post-mortem, and you have to have a big enough number to be able to analyze it to say, oh yeah, we're starting to see this trend, we better make a shift. Whereas you can now see that live. And that's what I loved about how ACTO looked at the problem too, is how do we make companies more agile so they can shift their model and be able to respond really quickly to market needs and their customers to help them grow.
Liv, it's interesting. Thank you for sharing that, and the point about data being that critical factor in making commercial organizations more agile and being able to respond fast. That's a question that we asked ourselves a few years back as well, was how do we best enable to first get that? What's a good quality data set that we can rely on consistently and have great degree of control over? It's interesting. For us, the answer was, we looked at what Google does. And if you peel open the layers, that's actually how they do infant studies. When they're in development psychology, when they're trying to determine if a stimulus is working or not, they track the eyeballs of the infant, and that's a data point that they collect that, yes, this stimulus is working. It's interesting. What works for babies works for adults as well, where we thought that behavior data around engagement, where folks were spending the time tracking their eyeballs, not literally, but figuratively, in terms of what was drawing the attention, and then aggregating that, we found that was very fascinating. And there are so many powerful insights that can be discerned from that. For example, one of the one of the device companies, we found that their top performing reps were consistently searching for a micro lesson called "Why Change the Script" before their meeting, which was around reframing the HCP behavior. And surprisingly and unsurprisingly, the bottom quartile reps were consistently looking at pricing sheets where they're selling more on price. Anyone that's run a sales team knows why they may not be hitting their numbers. But Liv, thank you for sharing all of that. Zooming out a bit from the tactical to the more strategic, how commercial leaders should be thinking about what's next in terms of supporting HCPs and promotion. What, in your view, is kind of this? Everyone's talking about hybrid, that we're going to move towards some sort of a hybrid model. I'm always scratching my head trying to understand, what does that hybrid model look like? So I'll pose that question to you as well.
I kind of feel like we're in it.
Yeah, we're
right.
That's right. Would love to hear, Liv, from you. What is your view of a hybrid promotional model as we move forward?
Interesting question. I wish I had the answer. I think we're all trying to guess and pull straws of what exactly that looks like. I think it looks different based off of the space that you're in. So for pharmaceutical companies, I think that they probably really have the need to figure out can you scale back potentially your commercial ground-based team and push more information to providers and consumers that isn't a commercial, that isn't a banner ad. And how do you get that true information to them without having to have as many boots in the street? Because we, over time, since the, last 20 years, you've seen sales reps access go down on the pharma side exponentially. And to your point, the only people that are getting in and able to have those meaningful conversations are the ones who are really the top players. And so those are the ones who will continue to be of huge value, but the kind of the lower individuals who maybe aren't able to contribute as much, I think you're going to start to see more inside sales effort or marketing effort put to information that's provided back to the physician, and then have that be influential enough to help have them make a decision. So think, Parth, about you going to the doctor and maybe you're on 8 different types of medications, and you say to the doctor, I've been having this really weird experience and it's really affecting my cognitive functioning. My thinking seems unclear, and the doctor, looks at all of your medication and can't quite figure out, is it a drug interaction that's causing it? Or is there something else that you should be given that might help address it, but that won't have any kind of counter interactions with these other medications? And a rep's not going to be there to answer that question. Imagine them being able to kind of log into a single source of truth and have some of that information at their fingertips. So I think that is, one area where we're going to start to see a bigger shift in how HCPs interact with their get information. It won't necessarily just be from their sales rep or a colleague. And I think on the med device side, you look at the advent of robotics, and if you think about how much that space has grown over the last 15 years, you have many different orthopedic companies that are all coming out with the robots. You've got Intuitive and Medtronic, J&J, Transenterix, all trying to compete in that space. On the surgical side, you've got neurological robots, and all of these robotic systems are capturing a lot of data. I think if a medical device company can start to use that data in a much more meaningful way, then they can also understand where there are greater opportunities from product development, and shifts in challenges of user behavior. And so I think that, all of these little things that we're seeing are bringing major shifts. But as far as it relates to the hybrid model, sorry, I'm getting a little off track here. I think that there's going to be a combination of sales rep plus some type of digital interaction, be it remote coaching from a manager, remote case support from a proctor. I think that digital technology is going to be a part of our day-to-day for the rest of our lives. But I think that the human element, like you said, will always be critical. I don't think that is going to disappear.
Liv, so powerful and so thought-provoking. If I'm hearing that, it's, again, like you said, that interplay of the human element and the technology. And as I'm also hearing you, Liv, I'm thinking there've been all these traditional silos in an organization that, as we move forward towards this new world, who knows, we are probably in the new world, we just don't know it yet. That's another possibility. But
I don't know, that's interesting. Maybe interesting good, I don't know. I'm trying to have my half glass full.
It's interesting that all these silos, as you mentioned, product development, you have your sales, marketing, direct to consumer, education. There's confluence in so many of those traditionally siloed organizations. And it sounds to me that one common denominator and the glue that can bind all these different teams is that data, because they can all benefit from that. And they can all benefit by collaborating to create that engagement and education for the end key stakeholders, physicians, patients. It's really powerful stuff. One thing that you mentioned that really jumps out to me, amongst all these other things, is you mentioned that the future of relationship with the consumer, whether it's a medical device company or pharma company, it's more than just a commercial or a banner. Liv, would love to hear your thoughts more on that. What is, I'm sure there's different manifestations of that, but talk to us a bit more about the spirit of that new relationship or opportunity to form that newer type of relationship with the end consumer.
Yeah, I think about my own personal consumption of healthcare, and an advertisement to me is a message that they are trying to bias me with, not necessarily the source of truth. And so when you're trying to, as a consumer of healthcare, find really the truth behind, whatever it is that you're looking for, you want to know that what you're going to is actually giving you information that is true and that will help you make informed decisions. And so I think that's a huge opportunity for both medical device companies and pharma companies, is to make more information available that is less promotional, but true to what it is that patients need, so that patients are more informed and then also can advocate for themselves better. And I think that will kind of rising tide floats all boats phrase. I think that it will really elevate the overall perception of medical device companies, as pharma companies, as wanting to add value to the user experience, not just trying to monetize their product. And I think that will resonate more with patients as well as with providers, for how they then want to interact with that company or with the product. What are your thoughts? I mean, you certainly are a consumer of healthcare, or you have family members that are. As you kind of think through, where there are opportunities, what would you like to see?
Yeah, Liv, thank you for that question and your thoughts. I've always wondered, why does the relationship with a pharma company or device company, why does it stop at the point that the pill is dispensed, or when the device is implanted? My dad's a dialysis patient, and for a very long time he was on the dialysis, in-home dialysis. He used the in-home dialysis machine, and we would get all these shipments of the solution that goes into the dialysis machine, and it would have the device company's name plastered all over it. Yet anytime my mom had a question, she would be trying to get hold of the dialysis nurse, or there was a relationship with the healthcare provider, but I almost felt that this company was a silent participant in that delivery of care. Yet they're uniquely positioned with so much clinical data. They probably have the most amount of knowledge and information about this device than anybody else. And I just think it had been a missed opportunity to build that true relationship with the patient, and going beyond, when the unit is sold or the device is implanted, or in the case of a pharma company, when the pill is dispensed. And it's not that dollars aren't there earmarked for direct to consumer. Putting my marketer hat on for a second, we're still deploying dollars through TV commercials and other places, but it's not translating, in my view at least, to that authentic relationship that today's consumer wants. And I think it is a tremendous opportunity for life sciences companies to educate the patients. Yeah. And going back to the second theme of our dialogue today, human and the technology exists, right? Where if I have any questions, if I'm trying to impress my wife tonight and I want to cook up chicken limon tonight, I'll pick up my phone and say, hey, Siri, what's the recipe for chicken limon? And I get the answer. But why can't I do that for my health? And the big question here is, what is the role that life sciences companies ought to be playing or can play in moving healthcare forward? And I think it's a tremendous opportunity.
Yeah, so I think I think part of it too is the payer plays a significant role in it too, right? So you have payer relationship, patient relationship, physician relationship, hospital, clinic, whatever. And I think like when I look at when I was with Apollo, we launched a intragastric balloon, and it's a temporary device for weight loss. And what we found was, because it was new to market and it was a significant shift in how physicians treated patients, because nothing like that existed in the market before in the US, that most providers didn't know how to coach patients or how to manage patients. And we saw that as potentially a major detriment to the success of the balloon, because if providers didn't know how to do nutritional coaching, medication management, and some of these other things, we needed to take a more active role in that patient's journey so that patients would be successful, and then therefore we also are successful. But ultimately, we knew that if we couldn't make our patients successful, we would never succeed. And so we ended up hiring, we spent a lot of time training dietitians in-house or in clinics and different offices. And what we found was they didn't really have the bandwidth or the time to adjust their protocols to doing something really different. And so going back to kind of like this clay, right? We all have a default mechanism for how we do things, and a process for how we manage information and disseminate information. both on the training side, but then also for within a healthcare practice. And a lot of providers are tasked with doing so many different things that to change a process requires too much time. So we ended up bringing dietitians in-house to then become the coach for all the dietary needs. And then we brought in our medical affairs team to help support clinics of those patients with their medicine management, so that we could optimize outcomes. And so you're right, there does need, I think that we see pockets of that where device companies are starting to take on a greater role with patients, but it's so fractioned. And I think, then the next challenge is getting that data back to clinics so that interacts with their EMR, and they have reportable data that they then have to use for their own certifications. And so right now, I think our system is really disjointed, and it makes it difficult for different entities to be as constructive and productive as possible to drive optimal success.
Liv, thank you for sharing that. And my view on this is, I think, and I'm starting to anecdotally see this, where, to your point, it's fractional. And I think those are the folks that are recognizing that change has already occurred. We joked about we might be in the new world. We are in the eye of the storm, and I feel the change has already happened, and we're going to see more and more leaders wake up to the reality that this change has occurred, and that fraction is only going to grow from here, where I think we're going to start seeing more investments being made from everything that we talked about today. It's how do you augment that human element of driving care, by investing more in your top reps, making sure that they are on their A game, supporting them through the cases, all the way to that omni-channel discussion we had on the HCP side of things, adding, providing more air cover, so to speak, with more supplemental touch points to healthcare providers, and even thinking more holistically about the care continuum and rolling up patients and consumers as part of the recipients of that education and coaching. And I think the stimulus of a lot of this is going to be the changed workplace, and secondly, I feel access is going to shrink so drastically, where it will just become a catalyst for so much change that's going to come in the next few years.
Yeah, Parth, it's interesting that you say that. So, I kind of like, it's easy to always have kind of my industry hat on in terms of thinking about things through the lens of a medical device company or through a med tech company. And I put myself back into the place of where I was a little over a year ago. And I think you knew that I had really significant reconstructive knee surgery, to the point where I couldn't walk for 3 months. I was non-weight bearing. And I was in the hospital for 4 days, came home, and I had a litany of medications I had to take on a very specific schedule. And I just remember, we had a paper document where we're logging the time, the dose, and all of these different things. And my husband would do that in the middle of the night. And he wears glasses, so sometimes I have no idea what he wrote. And then we're trying to figure out the next day. And I'm a healthy, cognitively strong person. So then you start to think about, what is that like for an elderly person, and the number of medications they're on. There have to be ways of simplifying it, or at-home care instructions for loved ones, or for anybody who's had a procedure. You maybe get a binder ahead of time with 20 different sheets of information, and not all of them are useful. So How do you get more relevant information to patients as they're either before they go through an experience or after, to make sure that they frankly have the best outcomes possible? And I do think that that's a huge opportunity for how we can improve the overall experience of healthcare consumption.
Yeah, absolutely. Leave and with that, I think that the keyword there being opportunity, and it's such a tremendous opportunity for us to combine the human and the technology element to drive outcomes across the care continuum, whether it's from lab to market with the sales reps, the healthcare providers, and ultimately patients. Uh, Thank you so much, Lee, for your time today and inspiring us to be a part of the change. And thank you for leading change from the front and being a change agent in healthcare. And thank you for being on the podcast. This has been on my bucket list for a while, so I can check it off now.
Well, Parth, it's always awesome to spend time with you, regardless of whatever format. And, I'm really excited about kind of the position that you guys are in, that explores in some of these really leading technology companies, because I think we're just at the forefront of what's to come and how technology is really going to revolutionize healthcare. So we'll see what the new normal looks like, but I think it will definitely incorporate a lot of the tools and technology that are coming to market and are on the market right now.
Absolutely. Thank you, Liv, again for being a change agent, and thank you for being on.
If you found value in our podcast and know of a change agent who is working to disrupt the life sciences industry, please nominate them using the form below.